paid traffic is actually repeatable growth daily. I've always thought about it as similar to working out, where if you go in and you have a workout and you're doing your diet and all that stuff, and you do it for 4 days, you're not going to see any results. But if you do it for 90 days, you're going to see results, right? Like that's kind of a guaranteed thing. If you work out and you eat healthy for 90 days, you'll be in a better spot than you were. Paid traffic is the same way.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by IndiePRO.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. This is episode 220. Welcome back to an exciting week here at Camp IndiePRO and Creative Juice HQ. With me, as always, is your co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. Ed, what is going on, dude? I'm excited for this episode.
Dude, me too. And I'm excited to be at Camp IndiePRO. It's summertime, so we're officially at summer camp, huh?
Is it summertime? Is this where you start calling it summertime? Like, are we crossing the threshold here towards the beginning of May?
Let's see. That's when I refer to it, but it's also been 90 here. Okay, so the official start of summer is June 21st, so I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
Hey, man, I'm with you in that spirit. I know you've got like the 502 sunshine energy, but I'm with you there.
Dude, absolutely. And like I said, it's 90 here, so it's been summertime for a little while. But more importantly, definitely very excited to jump into the episode today. I think we have some really cool stuff around top of funnel, paid, kind of growing an audience.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. We actually are going to be doing a little bit of a two-part episode here this week. And really, we wanted to start out and just kind of zoom out, 30,000 foot view and talk about some of the philosophies that we have when it comes to growing an audience, growing a fan base online, and the strategies and the methods that we use to make that happen at the agency, at IndieX, with the artists that we work with, primarily because there's a little bit of an interesting narrative that goes on in the music marketing space. And I've seen this evolve a number of times over the past, 5, 7, and more years. It seems like this goes in cycles where people are talking about all the cool ways that you can go viral and the organic strategies and hacks that you should be using to grow your audience on whatever the newest, hottest platform is. And then there are people talking about advertising and how you can do advertising to grow your audience. And then the cycle repeats itself where people say you shouldn't run ads and you should just focus on, XYZ thing to go viral. And it seems like this is a cycle that repeats itself over and over and over again. And we talked about this a few weeks ago on the show when we had Circa on at the beginning of our Web3 arc. I'll link to that episode in the show notes so that you guys can check it out if you didn't catch it. But I think that that's an interesting phenomenon that goes on, and we thought that it would be cool to address that here on the show and talk about why organic and paid acquisition of fans and growing an audience online aren't mutually exclusive ideas. And in fact, I think it's incredibly disadvantageous and even dangerous for musicians to lean into one in too heavy of a way, especially when it comes to cutting out paid advertising altogether, which is a narrative that I've been seeing spun more and more throughout this year, 2022. And I want to talk about that and talk about some of the philosophies that we kind of approach when it comes to growing an audience with our clients and how we work with the interplay between paid traffic and organic traffic.
Dude, it's really interesting because, I think at a high level, like you said, there's this cycling between paid and organic traffic and like, hey, you should only do this or you should only do that. And I feel like if anybody, like removing whether the conversation is around traffic or whatever, like if you ask anybody, hey, do you think you should just put all your eggs into one basket? They probably would say no. Like that's pretty typical advice. I feel like it's like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And so it's always been interesting to me to hear people say like, absolutely, oh, you should do this or you should not be spending money here. Like I feel like at a very high level to me, it's like, hey, you should do both and cycle. And like, that's what we see work really well, where if you're doing paid traffic and you're doing organic traffic, like I just experienced this for myself, where we started with a bunch of organic traffic, right? Like we were posting TikToks and they were going viral, and that was creating this upswing. So then on the back of that, it started to eventually go down, as all things do. So then we kicked on paid traffic and it brought it back up. And then right as the paid traffic kind of started going down and the results were less, we posted some other video clips organically that caught on, and that kicked it back up. So it creates this, like, over time, it's almost like they support each other. And while things were going well with the organic end, we were still running paid traffic. They just weren't going as well until something caught on, and then we went forward. So to me, it's like figuring out a balance. And I think trying to understand why people don't figure out a balance between paid and organic traffic, because I think they support each other really, really well and kind of provide for the, two opportunities for growth as opposed to just all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that that's just personally, I want to start out here by just addressing the elephant in the room and kind of what pains me and why this idea kind of came to us and why we started kicking around the idea of bringing this to the show is I get a lot of ads related to music marketing. Makes sense. I'm a music marketer, right? I'm a musician and I'm a marketer. I'm a music marketer. We do a lot of that stuff here. So it makes sense that I get a lot of ads that look like that. And the narrative that's kind of going around right now, a lot of what I'm seeing is like, you don't need to run ads. Just do this on TikTok or just do this on Instagram Reels. And I'm not here to fade either of those at all. In fact, like you just said, Ed, like we're going to go into both the benefits and kind of like the complementary elements that both paid and organic fan growth have together. But I think, and we're going to talk kind of individually about what benefits organic will bring to your music marketing strategy. But I want to say here, like, that is an incredibly dangerous narrative for musicians to hear, to be like, you can just rely on the thing that is hot right now, because platforms and their ability to be a consistent blue ocean for artists to tap into as far as getting new fans and being discovered, that doesn't last forever. And to put out there from a teaching perspective or a pedagogical perspective that like you can abandon something that is giving you the ability to get consistent at bats, to say that you can abandon that just to get hopefully viral traction organically is a really, really dangerous place to be, in my opinion. So I want to address that first as we kind of dive into talking about paid traffic here and kind of how we look at it from an agency perspective.
I mean, I think that that's a really, really fair point. Like, and to me, it's almost like if you're listening and you're an independent musician who's just starting out, paid traffic is obviously, if you had to do either or, paid traffic is the better option. Like, think about it, right? Organic traffic means you're creating content and you're posting. And we'll get into what that kind of means more in the second half of this. But paid traffic to me means, and it's what we do at the agency and in the trainings and try to teach you guys this stuff. Paid traffic means that you are taking this video asset that you've created and hopefully to spec, so it's a good asset, and literally putting it in front of your fans. And so paid traffic in my mind has always been the equivalent of touring without touring. Like, that's just how I've always thought of it, where the point of going on a tour, historically speaking, is that you're going to get in front of some potential fans, you're going to play some music, you're going to hopefully win a few people over, and then you come back. And so that same logic applies to paid traffic, where you have this asset. Hopefully you get in front of some people that like it. You get in a conversation in the comments with them, or more importantly, you get them on your email list. Now you're talking to them. You're actually forming a relationship, and this goes forward. What's better about paid traffic is that you can do that from your living room. It's way easier physically. It's way easier from your time commitment. And it's actually a way that you can control your growth. And for me and for a bunch of artists that we work with, and a lot of people in the Camp Indepreneur, it's like, I like it. It's catchy, right? Camp Indepreneur. But for a lot of those people, paid traffic has actually formed the first few steps of a career. Like, there was nowhere to go. And then, now I can run a Facebook ad to this great video I made. all of a sudden I have a fan base of a couple hundred people. Like it provides that first step. So as a starting artist, and I think I want you to kind of respond to that, Jack, and then I have thoughts just for bigger artists too. But as a starting artist, it's like paid traffic is the way to go. Like if you had to pick one, paid traffic would be the one in my mind. Not that you should, but like that is such a crazy idea to just be like you shouldn't be doing paid traffic.
I agree with you 100%. And yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying that in responding to your point there. I totally agree with you. I do think starting out running paid traffic, and I guess we should define here for anyone who might be listening for the first time and is maybe just coming into this wonderful world of IndiePRO and what we talk about on this podcast at Creative Juice. When we're referring to paid traffic, we're talking about running online advertising, digital advertising on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We're talking about buying ads on those platforms and running those ads to get new fans. That's what we're talking about when we talk about paid traffic. And when we talk about organic traffic, we're talking about organic posting on social media, trying to pop off virally on platforms like TikTok, on Instagram Reels in the news feed, on Facebook in the news feed, and using your content to generate an audience over time. Now, I mention that because when you talk about the idea of time, I think you said it well, Ed, in that like running ads to grow your audience gives you a massive shortcut to time, because the amount of content that you need to generate to really churn out consistency organically is taken out of the equation. You don't need to constantly be coming up with new content and spinning out new post copy for, post sometimes like 3 times a day. I see a lot of active creatives using on social, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. There's a lot of positives to that. However, when you run ads, you test videos and you test copy. You find the best one that is resonating with the audience that you've targeted as being the most ideal fit to your music, who are most likely or most suited to become fans of your music and your brand. And you're putting that in front of them, testing which resonates the most. And then from there, you're letting that run and you're letting it do its work. And allowing for that gives you a lot of consistency, and it gives you at-bats that you may not have had if you were just slaving away creating content and then posting it.
Dude, yes. And to me, the way I think about it is like paid traffic in this equation is like the consistency portion of it. And I know we'll get into organic stuff about like, hey, you should post consistently on your organic stuff, but paid traffic is actually repeatable growth daily. I've always thought about it as similar to working out, where if you go in and you have a workout and you're doing your diet and all that stuff, and you do it for 4 days, you're not going to see any results. But if you do it for 90 days, you're going to see results, right? Like that's kind of a guaranteed thing. If you work out and you eat healthy for 90 days, you'll be in a better spot than you were. Paid traffic is the same way. Where like if over time you say, hey, like Jack said, you get your assets in place, you know what your cost per result is and all this good stuff. Paid traffic then becomes essentially, I know that if I have $5 a day to spend on ads, that means for every $5 I get 20 views. So if I do that, that's a low number, right? But like for every $5 you get 20 views, I've got $150 to spend for the month. You can start to project out, here's how many views I'm going to get. And then it becomes this thing where you kind of set it and forget it almost, where you're like, okay, I know my results. Let me check in once a week to make sure they're working well. But every day, that's where you start to get that flow of, oh, I'm getting DMs every day. I'm getting comments every day. I'm getting followers every day. And that's so powerful because, like I said, so many independent artists don't know where to start, right? It's always like, I don't know where to begin. I'm not quite sure, like, how do I actually get a fan base? And it's like, you do this and then you let it run. And then you say, oh, look, 6 months later, all my friends who are just trying to swing for the fences, they're nowhere, but I've actually got 1,000 people now that follow me. Like that's pretty cool, right? And it just starts to extrapolate out. And so for me, I feel like paid traffic is so cool because it's predictable, it's repeatable, and it is directly tied to your budget. So if you have a bigger budget, you can spend more money, you get more people once you know what you're actually doing on that front. Obviously, like Jack said, that your videos and your creative and your copy have all been tested and dialed in. it's like you can kind of ratchet the spend up to get results you want within reason, right? Like you're not going to go overnight to like a Grammy winning artist level of fans, but like you can figure out and spend to actually start creating this ecosystem for yourself on a repeatable way. So that's why I feel like paid traffic is so important, because it gives you a lifeline to actually create and start your career.
Yeah, for sure. I liked your gym analogy a lot. First of all, like that kind of consistency. And I agree. It's a different kind of consistency than like content creation consistency, right? Like it's a consistency where you know that you're building these campaigns and you're running them and you're monitoring them and watching for your KPIs, the points of interest in terms of your growth. So you're looking at your, cost per video views. You're looking at your through plays, for example. You're looking at your cost per clicks. You're looking at your retention throughout your videos and how much each of those kind of retention points are costing, like, a cost per 75% view, for example. These are all data points that you're looking at. And you're right that in a lot of ways, like that allows you, especially as like a newer artist, to get consistent growth in a way that you can predict, because you can see and read the data and you can look at the metrics and say, if I make this change or if I decide to spend this much more money, then I can expect X result. And advertising is really the only way that you can do that. It's the only thing that allows you to establish a consistent baseline, which I think is really important to getting to a place where you do eventually have a critical mass of fans, because you have a marketing asset that's doing the work of finding those fans for you and allowing them to engage.
Yeah. And I think critical mass is a really great word that a lot of times isn't thought about. As an artist that's starting out, like your objective is to get a critical mass. You're trying to reach a point where enough people know about you that your name and your face and your logo, all these things start to have value online just because people have seen you so much. And that's not something you can rush. Like that's kind of goes back to my comment. You can't just say, hey, I have $1 million. I'm going to spend it over 1 month and now I'm going to be popular. It's like you could spend $1 million over 1 month, but how much do people actually know or remember your face, as opposed to $1 million spent over 4 or 5 years, right? Like if that's obviously a high budget, but I'm just saying, like you would create this brand awareness that also kind of comes from paid traffic continually happening with different pieces of content and stuff over time. So in my mind, paid traffic is like a great place to start in this conversation, because the ladder of paid to organic traffic is like, first find one piece of content that works really, really well, like a fan finder, then start running that paid traffic, and then start going for organic. Because I think Jack had a good point. Consistency on the paid ad front is different than consistency on the organic front. And to me, it's like you got to get the great piece of content, but then once you take the time to actually find that, the paid traffic consistency is pretty easy. You build an ad campaign, you let it run. If it starts to go down, you tweak it. But like once that's in place, this thing is now a machine that's auto creating fans for you and awareness for you. And so it's much, much easier to have that in place and know that that's happening every day, and then start making the organic content consistently. Because it's like at least something positive is happening, even if the organic content crashes. So I think one thing that I would be interested for you to kind of comment on, Jack, is like probably the objection to paid traffic would be, I don't know if it works and I don't want to put my budget there. I would say that's probably the number one objection. And so like, if someone says it to you, how do you go about not convincing them, or, laying out the facts? It's like, here's why that doesn't make sense. Like, here's why paid traffic works. And here's how you make it work for you if it's not already working.
I think that's a good question, and like definitely a good point, because budget is it's a concern for anyone who's trying to run a business. Is like, am I spending my money in the most effective way? But let me pose a question to that. Since we're kind of putting these two things against each other, right? Organic and paid, and we're pitting them against one another, really for the purpose of bringing them back together. I think that if I could sum up this discussion that we're having, that's kind of the purpose here, is to show that they're complementary and not opposed. But for the purpose of setting them apart just for a second, if you were to take your say your $500 a month budget, and you said, well, instead of doing that, I'm going to put that towards content creation. I'm going to be spending that towards making content, whatever that might look like. Maybe it's producing a music video every month and hiring the people that you need for it, whatever that might look like. Maybe that's influencer marketing. Although whether that falls under paid traffic or organic is probably a bit of a gray area, in my opinion. Like, you could probably put it into two different buckets if you really wanted to, into either of those buckets rather. But if you were to spend that money elsewhere, what I would ask you is, what do you do if you spend your $500 in one shot or over the course of a month and nothing happens? You have no real data to even explain why nothing happens. I think that is one really strong argument for putting budget towards advertising, is that with every dollar you spend, you're gaining information. You're gaining information on the fans that you're trying to target. You're gaining information on the content that you're using to put in front of them. And that is so, so valuable. Like, that information alone in the testing phase is worth the money. Not to mention the amount of people that you're actually putting yourself in front of. I think that that's really, really worth the amount of money, because it tells you, what about me as an artist or a band? What resonates with people? Does this type of content resonate with people, or does something else? Or did, the first video ad that I ever tried to run for my first single, did that just fall on its face compared to, the thing that I tried the next month that ended up taking off? That gives you really, really useful data that then kind of creates a feedback loop that you can then use for future advertising. And you can't always accomplish that with other places that you might spend your budget. You might spend, tons of money creating content for organic social, for example, and get no traction at all, and really have no evidence as to why that happened. So I think that would be my first consideration to make when it comes to that question of, like, should I spend my money here, and how do I know if it will work? Now, to your question about how do I know if it will work, what's cool about paid ads is that because you're paying to put your content in front of people, paying to put your video and your music in front of people, like we said, that gives you more at-bats. So by its very nature, you'll have a more likely probability of it succeeding as you do more of it and as you learn from what wasn't working. So the more at-bats you have, the more chances you have for something to go right. And then once that happens, you just put gasoline on the fire, and you're shortcutting all of your time in the process. So those are kind of my main sort of selling points for why advertising can work so well. We could get into the nitty-gritty of being able to target and not having to rely on hashtags and, your existing organic fan base to really carry a lot of the weight of sharing and social proof and growth. But I don't even need to go there, really. Just the logic of running ads, I think, kind of takes away that objection.
Yeah. I think it's worth kind of just quickly mentioning, if you're not familiar, essentially when you're running ads, you can say, I want to target fans of this band or this interest or this genre. And so if you have a piece of content that you think would fit for that, you can run ads to it. And that's where, Jack's point, it saves you time, and you learn very quickly, hey, let me spend $20 on this video over the next 2 days and let me see how it does. At the end of those 2 days, you have an answer on if the video is doing well or not. In 99% of cases, you can say, okay, it's good. Let me run a little bit more. Or this isn't doing very well. It speeds up your testing process, which, to Jack's point, helps you figure out, what about that video did people like? Let me try that in the next one. What do they dislike? Let me avoid that. And you learn these things as you test, but you test so quickly once you get the hang of it that you cover more ground as opposed to just relying on only organic. So that's a really good point, man. Paid traffic really serves as a lifeline to actually grow your audience, but it also serves as a way to quickly kind of do some research and development almost on your brand and on what's working for your brand. And it helps you know your audience. And a lot of times, this isn't meant to sound harsh, if your ads aren't working, it's either because you don't understand who you should be targeting, so you need to refresh your audiences and learn more about who your fans actually are, or the content's just not good. That's the kind of two things. And what's discouraging about that is, you could say people just don't like my music, but it's maybe they just don't like the video, right? Or maybe if you're trying to grow a fan base, you need to figure out your video is a little weird. Who actually is going to be interested in this and show it there? So what's discouraging is that there are things that artists might take personally on the ad front, which I think is one of the objections and why people quit so quickly on paid traffic. It's like, this is my piece of art. People don't like it. Too bad, someone's going to like it, and let me just go post a bunch of content, see if it goes viral. Whereas I think the thought process should be, there's two places to really look here: who I'm showing it to or what I'm showing these people. And if it doesn't get a positive reaction on the paid front, one of those two things has to change, and spend another $20 on it and see how it goes. So it's kind of interesting in that front, because paid traffic just expedites your learning. It expedites what's going to work, what's not going to work. And if you're really kind of removed from the artistry side of it, where you're not going to take it personally if you make a video and it's really, you think it's really great, but you run ads and it's not getting a good reaction, like, it helps you find what presents your music best if you're open to it.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a good way of kind of summing it up. Realistically speaking, I think running ads does two things that are really valuable to what you do organically. And we can get into that a little bit more kind of when we dive into the organic side of things here. But two things, like, advertising allows you to get mass market exposure that you would not have gotten otherwise very quickly and very affordably. Now, you can argue with me about the affordable part depending on what your budget is, and that's warranted, and I understand that. However, in the grand scheme of things, you can get mass market exposure at your fingertips, at your command, very affordably and very quickly. And what that does for you is it allows you to validate your music and your content in front of people very fast, and it allows you to see what's going to stick, what's not, what resonates, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't. And you may not get, like, if you were just focusing entirely on organic growth, you may not have gotten that for months. Like, the amount of data that you can get just from running some very, very simple low budget ads, you can get a serious amount of knowledge about yourself as an artist and a brand and what your fans like and do not like. You can get that in days versus potentially waiting months or even years before getting, a little bit of traction. And I think that I can't underline that enough.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's like the whole thing about affordable market exposure at your fingertips, that is just like such a good line and a good thought process, where it's like, even if you don't have crazy budget, and like I said, you have $5 a day, you're still covering more ground and being exposed to more people that will like your music than if you had nothing, right? Like $1 a day, $2 a day, that actually accomplishes something. And I think where people kind of maybe are thinking a little differently, and what will be interesting to kind of dive into the organic half next, is that paid traffic is not the home run swing in my mind. Unless you have thousands and thousands of dollars to spend on it, then you can really cover some ground quickly. But for most independent artists, paid traffic is that consistent. You're hitting singles and doubles, right? Like, you're just getting on base. And geez, a lot of sports analogies today. So
I like it.
But you're just doing the work. You're getting on base. You're like getting right. You're covering a little bit of ground. It's not the home run swing. That's where I think organic traffic kind of can play in more. And so the way I think about it is like, is it better to just go up and try to hit a home run every time? Or is it better to try to hit the home run, but also have something going in the background that's putting runners on base? So when you do hit that home run, right, now you're hitting a grand slam or something like that. Like, just increases the potential down the road. And it's a crazy idea to not have paid traffic, honestly, because it's just, we've touched on why. But
from a strategy perspective, just to give some clarity here on kind of how we approach it as music marketers, when we bring on a new artist into IndieX, the music marketing agency here at IndiePRO, one of the very first things we do for an artist of any size is we look to see, how are they getting attention? How are they getting new people to discover them? And if there isn't an advertising asset in place to do that on demand, like turning on a faucet, we make sure that that's one of the first things that we discuss and start planning towards and building out, so that that's continuously happening in the background. And this applies to artists that are just starting out, to ones that have, a massive fan base and don't even necessarily need that consistency because there's, just kind of constant groundswelling. Those kinds of pieces of infrastructure are really important to have. So that's something that we do for every artist that we work with, just to look to make sure, like, whether it's a single that's dropping or whether it's just, I haven't had music coming out in a bit and I need to make people aware of the last thing that I did. We look to see, like, is there an opportunity here for discovery at scale through ads? That's one of the first things that we do. It's so important because, again, it allows people who either aren't familiar with you, don't know you at all, or are familiar with you but maybe haven't really bitten in and become a fan. It allows them the opportunity to do any of those three things, which is really, really powerful.
Absolutely, dude. Could not agree more.
And if you guys are interested in learning a bit more about some of the paid advertising stuff that we've talked about here, we just recently revamped our flagship training, the Fan Finder Method, and it's chock full of exactly the kinds of videos that we would recommend for paid advertising growth of your fan base. So if you're looking to get into that and really tap into paid traffic as a way of growing as an artist, you can check out the Fan Finder training inside of IndiePRO. We'll leave a link to that in the show notes so that you can check it out. The new Fan Finder Method training is super, super cool. There's strategies in there for building the perfect type of video for your Fan Finder campaign based on countless videos that we've seen across the community and inside of IndieX, as well as the organic strategies and the paid traffic strategies to build campaigns around that video, from Facebook and Instagram ads to Reels to TikTok and YouTube and beyond. So it's pretty dope. But I'm excited to get into the latter half of this, kind of as we dive into the next episode here and talk about organic and why it's so important and why it's kind of the second leg to keep your fan acquisition going. So I'm excited to get into that. If you guys dug this episode and you like what we're talking about here on Creative Juice, give us a subscribe, leave us a review, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll catch you next time to cover the second half of this little rundown on fan acquisition and what works right now. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us, West Coast.